Hello, everyone. Today I want to share with you a story about betrayal, family, and the unexpected paths that grief can carve into our lives. This isn't a tale with neat edges or comfortable conclusions. It's about the messy reality of discovering that those closest to us are sometimes the most dangerous. A story about standing alone when you thought you were surrounded by support. The fluorescent lights of Westlake Memorial buzzed incessantly above Thaddeus Mercer's head as he shifted uncomfortably in the vinyl chair beside his mother's hospital bed. 3 days. He'd been sitting here for 3 days, watching Meredith Mercer's chest rise and fall in shallow, irregular breaths that seemed to grow weaker by the hour. The rhythmic beeping of monitors had become a somber soundtrack to what the doctors were now calling her final hours. Thaddeus rubbed his bloodshot eyes and checked his phone for what must have been the 20th time that morning. The screen showed 3 unanswered messages to his sister Imogen and a string of one-word replies from his wife, Sybil. Nurse Chen entered with a clipboard, checking Meredith's vitals before glancing sympathetically at Thaddeus. "Any word from your family?" she asked, adjusting the 4-line with practiced hands. "They're on their way." Thaddeus lied, the words bitter on his tongue. Imogen had promised to arrive yesterday from Seattle. His brother Quentin hadn't even bothered to reply beyond a terse, "Received your message 3 days ago." And Sybil, his wife of 12 years, had claimed she couldn't possibly miss the charity auction she was organizing. At 43, Thaddeus had built a moderately successful architectural firm, provided a comfortable home in the suburbs, and thought he'd created a stable family life. Yet here he sat alone, watching the woman who had raised 3 children by herself after his father's death slip away, one labored breath at a time. The pattern had begun years ago, though Thaddeus had refused to see it. When their father died unexpectedly of a heart attack 15 years earlier, Meredith had been grief-stricken but resilient. She'd taken over the small family bookstore, working 12-hour days to put all 3 children through college. Quentin had taken his business degree and moved to Chicago, rarely visiting, but always calling on holidays. "The market won't wait for family reunions," he'd say with a laugh that never quite reached his eyes. His occasional financial advice to their mother resulted in investments that somehow never yielded the promised returns. Imogen had married a tech executive, moved to Seattle, and produced 2 children she spoke of incessantly but rarely brought to visit their grandmother. "The schools in this area aren't what we want for the kids," she'd explain, though she had no problem leaving them with her in-laws while vacationing in Europe. Thaddeus's phone vibrated. A text from Sybil, silent auction going amazing. The Hendersons doubled their usual donation. "How's your mom?" "Hard day, I'm sure." 3 sentences about the auction. 1 half-hearted question about his dying mother. 0 offers to come to the hospital. Their marriage had been cooling for years, like a pot removed from heat, but still too hot to touch. Sybil had been his college sweetheart, bright and ambitious. Somewhere along the way, her ambition had shifted from their shared dreams to social climbing in circles that found Thaddeus's modest success and his bookstore owner mother embarrassingly provincial. "Thaddeus." His mother's voice, barely audible, pulled him from his thoughts. "I'm here, Mom." He leaned forward, taking her fragile hand in his. "You came." Her eyes, clouded with pain medication, still held a surprising clarity. "Of course I came. I've been here the whole time." "The others?" "On their way." He lied again, unwilling to burden her with the truth. A ghost of a smile touched her lips. "No, they're not." She squeezed his hand weakly. "It's all right. I need to tell you something important." She motioned for him to come closer, and when he leaned in, she whispered, "My desk at home. Bottom drawer. The key is behind the Dickens collection. What you find will explain everything." Thaddeus frowned. "Mom, what are you talking about?" "Promise me you'll look," she insisted with sudden urgency. "I promise," Thaddeus said, his throat tight with emotion. Meredith relaxed against her pillows. "You were always the steadfast one, like your father." Her eyes drifted closed. "The others, they're not what you think." The monitor's steady beep transformed into a continuous tone. Doctors rushed in, but Thaddeus already knew. Meredith Mercer was gone. As the doctor pronounced the time of death, Nurse Chen approached with an envelope. "She asked me to give you this when it was time," she said softly. Thaddeus took the sealed envelope with trembling fingers. His name was written on the front in his mother's elegant script. Out in the hallway, voices rose in a commotion. Quentin and Imogen had finally arrived, both impeccably dressed, both demanding to see their mother. "You're too late," Thaddeus said coldly as he stepped into the corridor. "She's gone." Imogen collapsed dramatically into a chair. "We tried to get here. The traffic from the airport was awful. Some of us have responsibilities, Thad." Quentin adjusted his expensive tie, the light catching on his gold cufflinks. "We can't all put life on hold for weeks like you." Behind them stood Sybil, looking uncomfortable in a designer dress that seemed out of place among the hospital's sterile whites and grays. "I came as soon as I could," she murmured, not meeting his eyes. "Convenient timing," Thaddeus remarked, the envelope heavy in his pocket. "All of you arriving exactly after she passed." A hospital administrator approached with clipboard in hand. "I'm sorry for your loss. There are some arrangements we need to discuss." As his siblings and wife followed the administrator, already arguing about funeral costs and arrangements, Thaddeus slipped away. In his car, he finally opened the letter. "My dearest Thaddeus, asterisk if you're reading this, I've gone to join your father. I'm sorry to burden you with this truth, but you deserve to know, asterisk. The safe deposit box at First National, key enclosed, contains evidence that Quentin, Imogen, and unfortunately your Sybil have been systematically stealing from both of us for years. Asterisk the family bookstore that Quentin claimed was worthless and convinced me to sell for tax purposes was actually valued at 3 times what we received. The proceeds that supposedly went into a family trust have been siphoned into offshore accounts. Even your architectural firm has been compromised through Sybil's handling of the finances. Asterisk. Asterisk more importantly, you should know that you are not alone in this world. Find Alara Winthrop in Millfield. She will explain the rest. Asterisk. Your loving mother, Meredith." Thaddeus sat frozen, the letter clutched in his hands as rain began to fall against the windshield. Everything he thought he knew about his family had just crumbled to dust. The key turned smoothly in the lock of Meredith's desk drawer. Inside lay a decades-old leather journal, a USB drive, and several folders neatly labeled with dates. Thaddeus's hands shook as he opened the first folder. Bank statements, property deeds, corporate documents, and a series of surveillance photos showing Quentin, Imogen, and most shockingly, Sybil, meeting with a man Thaddeus recognized as Vernon Blackwood, his mother's financial advisor. His phone rang. "Thaddeus, where are you?" Sybil demanded. "We're all at the lawyer's office for the will reading." "I'll be there," Thaddeus said coldly. "Don't start without me." When Thaddeus arrived at the law offices of Winters and Associates, the tension was palpable. His siblings sat stiffly in leather chairs while Sybil paced by the window. "Some of us have places to be, Thad," Imogen huffed, checking her watch. The lawyer, Miriam Winters, cleared her throat. "Now that everyone is present, we can proceed with the reading of Meredith Mercer's last will and testament." What followed stunned everyone in the room. Meredith had revised her will just 2 months earlier. The family home, which Quentin had been eyeing for years, was to be sold with proceeds going to literacy programs. The valuable first edition book collection Imogen had already mentally distributed among her friends was donated to the city library. Most surprisingly, Thaddeus was named executor of the estate with explicit instructions that Quentin and Imogen receive only token inheritances of $1,000 each. "This is outrageous," Quentin shouted, his face reddening. She wasn't in her right mind. "I'll contest this," Imogen threatened, glaring at Thaddeus. "You manipulated her when she was weak." Winters remained impassive. The will was witnessed by 2 physicians who certified her mental competence. Additionally, there's a video testament explaining her decisions. Thaddeus watched his siblings rage, while Sybil remained suspiciously silent. After the meeting, she approached him cautiously in the parking lot. "Thaddeus, about dinner tonight." "I won't be home," he interrupted. "Don't wait up." The town of Millfield was a 30-minute drive, a quaint place Thaddeus hadn't visited since childhood. Following his mother's instructions, he found Alara Winthrop's address, a modest house with a well-kept garden. The woman who answered the door was in her late 60s, with striking silver hair and familiar eyes that widened at the sight of him. "You must be Thaddeus," she said, as if she'd been expecting him. "You look just like your father." Over tea at Alara's kitchen table, the truth emerged. Alara had been Meredith's closest friend since college. After Thaddeus's father died, they had rekindled their friendship, keeping it private to avoid the jealousy of her other children. Your mother knew what they were doing, Alara explained, sliding an old photograph across the table. She hired a private investigator 3 years ago when money started disappearing. The photo showed a younger Meredith with Alara, both smiling widely on what looked like a hiking trip. There's something else you should know, Alara said hesitantly. After your father died, Meredith discovered something in his papers. Quentin and Imogen, they're not his biological children. Thaddeus stared in disbelief. What? Your mother was briefly married before she met your father. A short, unhappy union. When she and your father got together, he adopted them legally, raised them as his own. But you were their only biological child together. The revelation struck Thaddeus like a physical blow. Does this have something to do with the theft? Alara nodded grimly. They found out about their parentage years ago. I think that's when the resentment started. But there's more. She produced a thick folder. Vernon Blackwood has been helping them systematically loot not just your mother's accounts, but your company as well. Thaddeus flipped through the documents, his anger building with each page. Bank transfers authorized by Sybil, who had insisted on handling the company books. Property deals where Quentin had posed as Thaddeus's business partner. Loans taken out against company assets without his knowledge. Why didn't she tell me? Thaddeus demanded. She was gathering evidence, Alara replied. And she was afraid for your safety. Blackwood has dangerous connections. As if on cue, Thaddeus's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Asterisk back off, or you'll regret it. The money's gone. Accepted. Asterisk. When Thaddeus returned home that night, he found Sybil waiting, a glass of wine in hand, and concern painted perfectly on her face. Where have you been? She asked. I've been worried sick. Thaddeus stepped back when she reached for him. Have you really? Her expression faltered. Of course. It's been a difficult day for all of us. Has it? Thaddeus moved to the liquor cabinet and poured himself a whiskey. Tell me, how long have you been working with Blackwood? The glass nearly slipped from Sybil's fingers. I don't know what you're talking about. The offshore accounts, the forged signatures, the embezzlement from my company. Thaddeus's voice remained eerily calm. My mother knew everything, Sybil. She has records of every transaction. Sybil's facade cracked. Your precious mother never thought I was good enough for you. Quentin and Imogen told me what she was really like. Controlling, manipulative. We deserve that money after everything. Everything. Thaddeus interrupted. After she welcomed you into the family? After she loaned us the money to buy this house? Sybil's eyes narrowed. You have no proof of anything. Thaddeus smiled coldly. That's where you're wrong. And tomorrow the police will have it too. Later that night, Thaddeus heard Sybil on the phone, speaking urgently in hushed tones. The next morning, she was gone, along with her jewelry and the contents of their joint account. The investigation moved quickly once Thaddeus turned over his mother's evidence. Federal agents had apparently been watching Blackwood for years, suspecting him of running a sophisticated fraud operation targeting wealthy families. Thaddeus's case broke it wide open. Quentin was arrested at Chicago O'Hare attempting to board a flight to the Cayman Islands. Imogen was found at her lake house, frantically burning documents. Sybil remained at large, though her accounts had been frozen. At his mother's funeral, Thaddeus stood alone by the grave, the other mourners keeping a respectful distance from the family scandal. As the service concluded, a hand touched his shoulder. Mr. Mercer? I'm Detective Zora Holloway. The woman was tall with intelligent eyes and a firm handshake. I'd like to speak with you about your wife's whereabouts. Over the following weeks, Thaddeus worked closely with Holloway, piecing together the extent of the conspiracy. Blackwood had targeted Meredith years ago, recognizing her vulnerability after her husband's death. He then manipulated Quentin and Imogen's resentment, eventually recruiting Sybil when she expressed frustration about Thaddeus's devotion to his architectural firm rather than her social ambitions. They were planning to leave you bankrupt, Holloway explained during one of their meetings. Once the money was gone, Sybil would file for divorce, claiming your financial mismanagement destroyed the marriage. Thaddeus couldn't help but laugh bitterly. And I never saw it coming. People rarely do when it's family. She replied with unexpected gentleness. The investigation revealed that the conspiracy went deeper than Thaddeus had imagined. Several other families had been targeted by Blackwood's organization. As Thaddeus helped build the case, he found unexpected strength in the pursuit of justice, not just for himself, but for all of Blackwood's victims. 6 months after Meredith's death, Sybil was apprehended in Portugal. Thaddeus watched impassively as she was led into the courthouse for arraignment, refusing to meet his eyes. Quentin and Imogen had already accepted plea deals, providing testimony against Blackwood in exchange for reduced sentences. That evening, Thaddeus returned to his mother's house, which he'd kept despite the will's instructions. He hadn't been able to bring himself to sell it yet. Alara was waiting on the porch. "You did it," Alara said simply. Thaddeus nodded. "She would have been proud, I think." "She was always proud of you." Alara handed him an old cigar box. "She wanted you to have this when it was all over." Inside the box, Thaddeus found photographs of his parents, happy moments frozen in time. A handwritten recipe for his father's famous Sunday pasta sauce, his mother's wedding ring, and a final note. "Thaddeus, by now the truth has come to light. I'm sorry for the pain this has caused you, but not for protecting you as long as I could. Some will say I should have told you sooner, but a mother's instinct is to shield her child, even when that child is a grown man. What matters now is what you build from here. The foundation of lies has been swept away. What replaces it is entirely up to you. Remember that family isn't always blood. It's the people who stand by you when others fall away. All my love, Mom." Thaddeus folded the note carefully and looked up at Alara. "She mentioned family not always being blood. Was she talking about you?" Alara smiled sadly. "Partly, but there's someone else you should meet." She gestured toward a car parked on the street where a young woman now stood watching them uncertainly. "This is Octavia," Alara said as she approached. "Meredith helped her escape an abusive marriage 3 years ago, set her up with a new identity, a job at the local college library. She's been like a daughter to your mother ever since." Octavia extended her hand. "Your mother spoke of you often, Mr. Mercer. She said you were the only one who truly inherited your father's integrity." As the three of them sat on the porch sharing stories of Meredith late into the evening, Thaddeus felt something he hadn't experienced since before his mother's illness, a sense of belonging. These strangers, connected by Meredith's kindness, were somehow more family than those who shared his name. 1 year later, Thaddeus stood in the newly dedicated Meredith Mercer Reading Garden at the city library. The prosecution of Blackwood and his associates had concluded successfully, and Thaddeus had rebuilt his architectural firm with honest partners. Detective Holloway, Zora, as he now called her, stood beside him at the dedication ceremony. Their professional relationship had gradually evolved into something more personal. Neither rushed it, both carrying scars from betrayal, but the foundation was solid. Alara and Octavia had become fixtures in Thaddeus's life. Sunday dinners were a new tradition in Meredith's old house, which Thaddeus had ultimately decided to keep. Together, they had established the Meredith Mercer Foundation, supporting victims of financial fraud and domestic abuse. As the small crowd dispersed after the ceremony, Zora squeezed his hand. "You okay?" Thaddeus gazed at the garden, bright with his mother's favorite flowers. "You know, for the first time in a long time, I think I am." In his pocket was his mother's final letter, worn from repeated readings. He no longer needed to take it out to remember the words that had changed everything. Instead of breaking him, the truth had ultimately set him free. The past couldn't be changed, but the future, that was still unwritten. Thank you for joining me for this journey through Thaddeus's story of betrayal and resilience. While most family dramas don't involve federal investigations and offshore accounts, many of us know what it feels like to stand alone when we expected support. To discover that the people we thought we knew best had been wearing masks all along. What I find most compelling about Thaddeus's journey isn't the dramatic revelation or even the pursuit of justice, but the quiet rebuilding that follows devastation. The recognition that family can be found in unexpected places, and that sometimes the greatest inheritance we receive isn't money or property, but the truth, however painful it might be. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this story. Have you ever experienced a moment when you realized someone close to you wasn't who you thought they were? How did you rebuild afterward? Share your reflections in the comments below, and let's continue this conversation together.